This bill, Mr. Speaker, is the result of the detailed advice received in the course of the ongoing closing process for the redevelopment of the Fairmont Southampton Hotel. Mr. Speaker, the 2022 Act is not in force and would only have come into force once all conditions precedent for closing had been met. Therefore, this bill will govern the full package of support to be provided to support the project. Mr. Speaker, this bill is required primarily to adjust the method in which tax and customs duty concessions are granted after reopening of the hotel. They are being restructured as rebates instead of direct relief. Mr. Speaker, rebate versus relief may sound inconsequential, but the change is a critical component of the redevelopment's financing structure and a key protection for the government and hence the people of Bermuda. In simple terms, it means the hotel must first pay the normal taxes or customs duty in accordance with existing law before being entitled to a rebate. In turn, rebate payments will immediately flow back to repay the loan that the government has guaranteed. In this way, the value of any concessions the hotel earns after it has reopened will flow only through accounts that are ring-fenced solely for the purpose of reducing the government's exposure to the guaranteed loan. In other words, this measure will enhance the fact that, or the possibility, enhance the position and reduce the possibility that the government guarantee will be called. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will also recall the recent amendments to the Public Treasury Administration and Payments Act 1969, the PTA amendment, which provides the legislative mechanism to permit payment of rebates out of the consolidated fund. The PTA amendment also requires that any entitlement for a specific person or company to receive rebates, along with the nature of the relevant rebates, must be granted through an act approved by the legislature. Mr. Speaker, the approval of the legislature in relation to rebates to SDN Properties Limited, owner and development of the Fairmont Southampton Hotel, is the primary purpose of this act. Rather than amending the 2022 Act, it is being brought forward as a new bill for practical reasons in parliamentary drafting. Furthermore, in conjunction with the recent PTA amendment, it will complete all legislative requirements relating to concessions that will enable the agreement of the various financing parties and ultimately the commencement of this nationally important redevelopment project. Mr. Speaker, the modifications this bill provides with respect to hotel concessions, along with the PTA amendment that permits payments under the approved rebate structure, strengthens the protections for the government of Bermuda and hence the people of Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, this bill here today has nothing to do with special development orders, as did the bill in 2022 had nothing to do with special development orders. It is to enhance the protections, allow this very important development for this island. And as I've stated here before, and as I know all members in this house know, nothing in tourism moves significantly without this hotel coming back online. No beds, there's no significant movement in that. Airlines, our ability to attract more airlift is enhanced. Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House for consideration, and I look forward to the support of honorable members. This has been a long journey, Mr. Speaker, but I am confident that we are nearing a successful completion that will see jobs created, economic activity generated, tourism revitalized, and a signature property restored to prominence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? MP Cannoneer, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We won't be long on this at all. The last one was long. This is something that we agree with. We're happy to see that the clauses that have been put in place to strengthen the government's position as far as offenses and the likes are concerned have been actually put in place. So I understand that I assume that since 2022 was not ratified, that was the case, that they were strengthening to bring this forward. Again, I'd like to thank the minister. He did pull me aside to discuss beforehand. So he has answered the questions that I did have in prior. And so I appreciate the fact that he has done so. And I did advise that, unfortunately, many of the public are confusing this with the SDO that doesn't even exist at this point in time and still in discussion. So I was happy to hear that the honorable member did bring up the fact that and clarify, as I suggested, that this is solely about the renovations and the concessions for the Southampton Princess, and of course how government safeguards itself towards these here. So really and truly, I only had two concerns, and that was concerning the rebate, to understand exactly how does the rebate work. And the honorable minister has provided somewhat of an answer to how that rebate takes place. I guess in more specifics, because we're talking about three different areas, and then in addition to that, customs duty, payroll tax, hotel occupancy tax. I was just curious so when they actually pay those money as they would normally do, and so then that rebate, I would assume the finance minister would take that into consideration coming from the consolidated fund, and then the rebate then would go towards the guarantee, if I'm correct. Is that what you said? Yeah. Okay. And agreed, Mr. Speaker. Makes sense. I now understand the changing of that, how vulnerable it was before you put in rebate. An exemption certainly is a completely different story. So I understand the efficacy in that. And the only other concern that I had was, sorry, let me just pull over to it, was the 70 years. And I don't even need to go into a committee on that, but I'm sorry, the 70% of Bermudians. My concern really was within 6 years from now, knowing that the industry really is struggling right now, and hearing from the industry stakeholders, hoteliers who are operating, it's extremely difficult for them to even come close to 70% occupancy. And there needs to be a culture shift, quite frankly, for us going back into the hospitality industry. In talking with the minister, and there were 600 maybe plus employees that were there before. Many of those folks have moved on, retired and the likes. So it is going to be a task. So I will be watching closely as the training departments and the industry seeks to train Bermudians, get them up to par, so that they can take on positions. One of the other parts to that 70%, in mentioning the training, we'd like to also see management training including in that, so that our people are getting into the senior positions. Doesn't specify that, but it would be good to see that we are also putting training in place towards having senior people running these hotels. So with that in mind, I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Cannoneer. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Opposition Leader, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague said, we support the legislation. And I just have a couple of minor questions. In regards to the hotel development itself, obviously a lot has said about that already. And it is my understanding or our team's understanding that the hotel will be built before any villas. So the question is, somehow can we have that condition baked into the legislation, that the priority will be building the hotel first, and then the villas will follow shortly thereafter? We do not want to have another Palmetto Gardens whereby the developers made a commitment to build the hotel, and to this date, there is no hotel there. And so, Mr. Speaker, I ask the minister to look into that. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that the minister spoke about, he indicated that the 2022 legislation was not enacted. So my question now is, given that we have the 2023 legislation, are we going to rescind the 2022 legislation? So if you can look into that to see if it's worth rescinding, because I reviewed it and most of the issues addressed in the 2022 legislation is in the 2023 legislation. And the last question that I have is, I note that the schedules have accommodations for Asper's Cove, which is on South Shore Road, and Faraway Guest House Complex, which is in Dunscombe Road in Warwick. Obviously, I grew up in these areas. I know them intimately. And can the minister provide the scale and extent of the development that's going to be in these places for the staff quarters? And what is the value of the development of these staff quarters? And what type of timeline are we going to have? I know that Faraway has been a staff quarter for the Fairmont Southampton Princess since when I was working at this Fairmont Southampton Princess. That was yesteryear, I'll say. It was certainly a long time ago. And I, being my nosy neighborhood cop, I went up there on the weekend to take a look. And the accommodation at the Fairmont needs some kind of loving care for sure. And so I know that's going to be a hefty development project as well. So if the minister can also provide details on the plans for the staff quarters for Aspen Park and Fairway, so we could have some type of scale and idea as to the value and the type of investment they're going to make available for their staff quarters, Mr. Speaker. And I think those are the only questions that I had. Oh, I know, another resident nearby asked the question, what will happen with the water treatment plant at the bottom of Southampton Princess on the North Shore side? Are they going to have renewable sources, or how are they going to deal with it? Because obviously there are issues when it comes to neighborhood challenges, the smell of the complex, and so on and so forth. So I'm just looking out for the neighbors of the area, and I have to identify my interest in that. My father lives near that, and so I'm just asking the minister to provide details on how the water treatment will be addressed going forward. I think that is all I have. And if it's not, I'll bring it up in committee. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Richardson?
Yes, good evening,
Anthony
Mr. Speaker.
Richardson?
Be very brief. I'm going to probably run the risk of getting in trouble tonight because I agree with MP Cannoneer again in terms of. No, just going. And I say that because I'm pretty sure I got to frame this correctly, right? But this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, is absolutely brilliant. And I say brilliant because if you take it at an individual level, right? if you say to me, Anthony, you have to pay $1,000 a month, let's say, but I'm going to allow you not to pay for 2 years, I get used to keeping the money. And when it comes time for year number 3 to start making the payment, guess what? There's a problem. Because suddenly I'm used to having that money, spending on whatever I want to spend it on, and I don't actually have it in order to pay what I'm supposed to pay. And so what this legislation effectively does is say to the owners of Fairmont Southampton, listen, you have to pay your money as you would normally pay it. But government will take the money and pay it on wherever it's got to go. And that's a much better plan than saying to Fairmont Southampton, guess what? We're going to allow you to be free, make no payments, and then suddenly in year whatever to start making the payments. And so it is not lost on me obviously I don't know who decided this here, but how brilliant this is, because it is a much safer process. And even for us, I'll say this, Mr. Speaker, for us individually, if we are at a point in our individual debt service, for example, and there's some way whereby we're saving money, is to put the money aside, keep putting it aside, because if you don't do it, you get used to actually spending it. And when you need to put it somewhere else, you can't do it. That's a very small example of how this can help us in our individual lives. But I'll say one more time, I do believe that this is actually a brilliant piece of legislation, which not only secures Bermuda's future in terms of the guarantee portion of it, but it ensures that the owners of the new Fairmont would not get used to having money that they have to use otherwise. And so one more time, MP Cannonier, I'm not going to agree to you anymore tonight, but for now, I agree. So thank you.
Thank you, MP. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? None. Minister?
I'll just deal with the few questions that were asked. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, banks sometimes, when they loan you money, they require that you open up an account with them. The only purpose for that account is in your name. You can put money into that account, but you cannot take money out. And that money that you put in there is to service that loan. So this, on a much larger scale, when the government receives those taxes that are payable into the consolidated fund, they will be then transferred from those accounts or that account into the account, an account with the lender, the local lender, in the name of the developer. The developer will not have access to those funds. Those funds will solely be to meet commitments to the lender, the local lender, that is, because that is the portion of the financing that the government has guaranteed. And as I said earlier, the idea is to not have that guarantee cold. Hopefully that provides some clarity for the honorable minister, the honorable member from number 12. Now, my honorable colleague, the Minister for Economy and Labor, for some 2 to 3 years now, has been providing much training and retraining for the people of Bermuda who find themselves in a bit, who have been challenged by the results of the pandemic. And so he's doing his best, along with the Bermuda Tourism Authority and the Bermuda Hotel Association, in training young Bermudians, retraining older Bermudians who wish to participate in the hospitality industry. I've seen some of the young individuals in the management trainee programs at a number of the hotels around the island, and they're doing extremely well. So that will help us a little bit, but we will work with our colleague, the Honorable Minister for Economy and Labor, so that we can get as close as possible to that 70% Bermudian. And as the people of Bermuda will know, and I'll state it again, this this party is always, currently and has always in the past, and will always look out for the people of Bermuda and try and do what's best for our people. The honorable member from number 8 asked if the hotel will be built first. The legislation that we're talking about today that replaces the 2022 legislation. Well, I just won't bring that into operation because the conditions have not been met, and rather instead I will bring this 2023 Act into operation. So no, it would just not be made operational. Will the hotel be built first? The legislation that we dealt with in 2022 and what we're dealing with today came with a 3-page renovation scope of work summary. Those are the items that this refers to. And to your third question, at the very top of page 3 is a major refurbishment of the wastewater treatment plant. And I can provide you with a copy of that, which, if you like. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be committed.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy?
Members, we are now in committee of the whole for further consideration on the bill entitled Fairmont Southampton Hotel Act 2023. Minister Campbell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Clause 1 provides for the title of the bill. Clause 2, did I move clauses 1 to 7? Sorry. Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah. Clause 1 provides the title of the bill. Clause 2 provides the definitions for the purposes of the bill. Clause 3 sets out the customs duty and tax rebates granted in respect of the hotel redevelopment as follows. A full rebate from customs duty paid in respect of any building materials, furnishings, fixtures, and equipment which are necessary for the building, furnishing, and equipment of the hotel redevelopment for a period of 15 years, less any period for which customs duty relief is granted prior to the hotel opening date, after the hotel's opening date. B, a full rebate in relation to hotel occupancy tax paid in respect of the hotel for a period of 15 years after the hotel opening date. A full rebate in relation to land tax paid in respect of the hotel for a period commencing 6 years after the hotel opening date and ending of the 15th anniversary of the hotel opening date. D, a full rebate in relation to the employer's share of the payroll tax paid in respect of persons employed by the hotel for a period of 15 years after the hotel opening date. Clause 4 sets out the terms and conditions subject to which the rebates are granted. The land tax exemption is subject to confirmation that in 6 years through 15, year 6 through 15, at least 70% of the hotel staff are Bermudian. The payroll tax exemption is subject to the operation of a management training program at the hotel for Bermudians. Clause 5 relates to relief from customs duty and provides for the giving of certain information to the collector of customs in relation to goods necessary for the building, furnishing, and equipment of the hotel redevelopment. Clause 6 relates to the payment of customs duty on the use or disposal of goods which were imported duty-free. And clause 6 creates criminal offenses subject to the penalties
Clause
provided.
That's clause 7.
Clause 7, sorry.
Yeah.
Creates criminal offenses subject to the penalties provided in clause 8.
Any other speakers to clauses 1 to 7? Go ahead, Simons. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'd like to direct the minister to item 4.
Clause 4, you talking about?
Yes, to qualify for the rebate in relations to land tax under section 31C, the hotel developer shall confirm in writing to the minister that in the years 6 through 15, at least 70% of hotel staff are Bermudian. Mr. Speaker, I support that initiative without question. But a number of hoteliers are saying to me that for a project of this scale, and the fact that not many people are entering the tourism business, it may be very difficult to achieve the 70% requirement as far as Bermudian staff. And I would love to see that. I support it 100%. So my question becomes, what happens if the hotel tries its very best, its utmost best, and it cannot achieve the 70% requirement of Bermudians? I know that they have a robust training program. I know that the director of human resources are committed to training Bermudians. But what happens if they don't meet the 70% requirement after they've done all they can to get Bermudians to fulfill it? We can't penalize them. So I'd like for the speaker to speak, the minister to speak to that clause, please. Thank you.
Okay, any further speakers on clauses 1 to 7? There appear to be none. Minister,
Mr. Chairman, on the government side, as I stated before, we are 100% behind the employment of Bermudians. We have some things in work. The Minister for Education has a program in place, a signature for the hospitality industry. That's long-term, yes, we recognize that. I mentioned about the training in my closing remarks before we moved into committee, that the training that's going on and will continue to go on. And the whole reason we're here discussing this bill today is because we want this hotel open. So we will work with the hotel, taking this into consideration. They have 5 to 6 years after opening to reach this target, and we will work with them during that time to help. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that clauses 1 to 7 be approved.
it has been moved that clauses 1 to 7 be approved. Are there any objections to that? There appear to be none. Clauses 1 to 7 are approved. Continue, Minister.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move clauses 8 through 15.
Continue.
Mr. Chairman, clause 8 prescribes penalties and forfeitures. Clause 9 makes provision for offenses committed by officers of corporations. Clause 10 gives the minister the power to amend or repeal provisions of sections 3, 4, or 5 of the act where there has been a breach of any of the given circumstances. Clause 11 gives the minister the power to issue guidance. Clause 12 gives the minister the power to make regulations. Clause 13 clarifies that this bill does not modify the requirements of the Development and Planning Act 1974 as regards obtaining any planning permission necessary for the hotel redevelopment. Clause 14 provides consequential amendments to the Revenue Act 1898 in furtherance of Clause 6. And Clause 15 provides for commencement by notice in the Gazette.
Any speakers to the clauses 8 to 15? There appear to be none. Want to move the clauses, Minister?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 8 to 15 be approved.
It has been moved that clauses 8 to 15 be approved. Are there any objections to that? There appear to be none. The clauses 8 to 15 are approved.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the preamble be approved.
It has been the schedules first.
Sorry. Mr. Chairman, I move that the schedules be approved.
It has been moved that the schedules be approved. Are there any objections to that? There appear to be none. Approved.
Mr. Chairman, I now move that the preamble be approved.
It has been moved that the preamble be approved. Are there any objections to that? There appear to be none. Approved.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be reported to the House as printed.
It has been moved that the bill be reported to the House as printed. Are there any objections to that? There appear to be none. The bill will be reported to the House as printed. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. Mr. Speaker.
Members, are there any objections to the bill entitled the Fairmont Princess Act 2023 being reported to the House as printed? There are none. The bill has been reported. The next item on the order paper this evening is the Merchant Shipping Fees Regulations 2023.